Arlene Castellano, a licensed realtor in the state of Massachusetts. Buying Mi Casa podcast is an informational platform for home buyers. The goal is to use social media to bring awareness to the public on the home buying process and its resources.
Welcome to Buy Mi Casa. I'm your host, David Faley. And with me today, a guest speaker is going to be Arlene Castellano she's a realtor from Maria Acuna Real Estate Agency here in Springfield, Massachusetts. So, Arlene, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy being here.
Well, can you give me a brief description of what got you into the real estate business?
Very quickly, there is a huge, long story behind it, but basically I was unhappy in my previous profession about 5-6 years ago. I was in insurance. I hated it. Went to buy a house, and the person I purchased the house with, who is now my manager at Maria Acuna Real Estate, I saw how he was in business. He seemed so laid back. He seemed to be enjoying life, and I wanted it. So I bought my house. About 2 weeks later, quit my job and got into real estate.
That's a big leap.
That is. And it hurt for a while. It was definitely not the most planned idea I've ever had, but it worked out in my favor. And now, 5 years later,
feels real good, right?
Hurt feels good, and it feels real good now. But now I'm on the board of directors at the Realtors Association, and I run the Young Professionals Network. So I spend a lot of time helping other realtors new to the business build. And being a part of the board of directors, I get to know what's going on in the area and be a part of it all.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good professional achievement. Very proud of you, Arlene.
I'm very proud too.
Excellent.
I went through a lot these past few years, personally and professionally, and to still be able to get to where I am at has been an amazing experience.
And even going through all that bunch of difficulties or obstacles, which is let's call it minor inconvenience.
Yeah, we'll call it that.
Even with the minor inconvenience, you're still able to provide excellent customer service.
I try to. Yeah, I really care about what I do, which is what was important to me getting into this business. Is I didn't want just another job. I wanted life fulfillment, and this gives me that.
How was your experience going through the process of buying a house? How was your experience with a real estate agent, and how did that impact you to want to become an agent?
It was like working with a friend, which he was. I mean, it was Elias Acuna, Maria's son, and I knew him growing up. So it was working with a friend. And it was a great experience. He was very kind and answered all my questions and spoke to me, didn't speak down to me. He was very upfront and honest and got me where I needed to be. And it was a wonderful experience. And I think whether or not we had known each other previously, it would have been the same way. And the approach he took is how I am now. I approach is I'm helping a friend get a house. And I speak to them as if they were friends.
If it's not broken?
Yeah. And they become friends. My clients become friends. And that's the beautiful thing about this business. And when I was in insurance, a client was a client, and there were clear lines. You know, somebody else owned the business, and there were clear lines. You can't fraternize with the clients in any sort of way. This is a business where clients become friends, and cases become family. And it's a great way to connect with people.
Is the system he used to provide you service it's not broken, then you don't need to fix it because you use the same system when you work with the client. Treat them as friends.
Yep.
But of course, there's going to be a clear line of distinction between, taking care of business.
Oh, of course.
Personal.
Yeah. You make sure that they understand that I'm the professional and just listen to me. And part of what I have to do is make them understand that I'm the professional and that I'm on their side, and make sure that they listen to my advice, which is not always easy. People are resistant. A lot of people think they know what they're doing. But it's part of my job to make them realize that.
They know what they're doing until the brick come across and hit them in the head, right?
And it happens. There's times when I tell them not to do something, and they either think they don't really understand what could go wrong, so they make a mistake, and it's like, I'll never say I told you so, but I'm saying, next time that I'm doing things for you, and
I
want you to
would.
succeed.
I would rub it in. I told you so. I would rub it in.
Well, I might say it after they close on the house.
Oh, hell no. I would rub it in.
And we laugh after the case. You know, if they did something stupid, I'd be like, remember when you did this? And it almost blew up in your face.
Yeah.
And
So
I was
you
like,
get a chance to laugh.
thankfully, my experience got us out of that situation, which is, you know, being in the business this long, is people mess up all the time across the board. And part of what I have to do is figure out how to make it better. So how to fix it. Exactly. So I spend a lot of time fixing things that because of mistakes other people have made.
How long ago did you purchase your home with Elias?
It was 2014. So
2014.
6 years ago.
Can you remember when you were introduced to the offer to purchase? Can you remember that?
No, honestly. The reason I can't, and I say this in first-time home buyers classes, it is such a stressful experience that it's a blur. Everything that comes across you is a blur, which is why real estate agents, realtors are important, because we help clarify things in the moment. But honestly, I don't remember signing a document. I barely remember finding the house. And a lot of it is because it's such a stressful, and it's a good stress because you're looking for your house and it's happy stress, but it's stress no less. So when Elias gave me the offer, he just went through it like I would with a buyer now. Here's who you're offering. This is the address. This is the, you know, we're going to go through that now. And I know he went through it because I signed off on it. But the actual remembering of that whole thing, I know it's gone.
Well, that's exactly why we're here today.
Yes.
And this is why we have the podcast. Because for the podcasters, the listeners can always come back and use this podcast, or whether it's on Facebook or in a video, they can always use it so they can listen to 30 or 40 minutes of what is an offer, what is inside an offer, what are the contingencies. So can you share what is an offer to purchase?
Yeah, sure. So that's a big question. There's a lot of components to that, but the basic offer is what you're giving the seller, what you want to give the seller in order to purchase their house. And in that offer, it has every single detail that you're offering them. And that's how much, what you're going to do for a deposit, dates and all that. And we can get more into that. But the basic idea of the offer is just to present to the seller what you want to give them to get their house.
That's why they call it offer, because I'm offering you this.
Yes.
In other words, to secure and to purchase this property. Mm-hmm. Or for you to say, well, we're going to accept it. That way they're not in between taking other people's offer.
Yes.
So if your offer is enticing enough, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to accept this offer so we can continue negotiation. So the offer doesn't stop there. Mm-hmm. The offer is just the beginning of a dance, beginning of the negotiation process.
Well, see, right now, that's an interesting point because the way the market is right now, it's a heavy seller's market. So what that means is there aren't enough houses to meet the demands of buyers. So what we're seeing now are multiple offers on properties. So you find this house, if you like it, chances are 10 other people like it, and there are 10 other offers on the property. So you put in your offer, you might not have that dance. So it might just be that's your only chance. You got to go in at your best for that house, and you might not get the seller to engage with you.
So for the simplicity of this, let's keep it as the market is just a stable, regular market, because I know this market is not going to last forever. So if anybody listened to this podcast during this period of time, I just want them to understand what the offers is.
Sure.
And when the market, they're going to just deal with the market as the market presents itself.
Yes.
So let's assume that the market is just a regular market. It's not a buyer-seller's market. People are just buying and selling. So the offer is just the initial stage to start that dance.
Yes.
So what comes after that?
It's important to break down what's in the offer. It is not just the number. It's not a house is listed for $200,000. I'm going to give them $200,000. There are many components to your offer that are important. aside from the number. Obviously, the number is the biggest thing sellers look at. They want to make sure they're getting what they want, but it also depends on their situation. So the first thing in the offer, the first line is their name. I'm offering this person. Usually we just put seller of record officially. So, when we present the offer, usually we don't know their name up front. So we just put seller of record and then the address. We have the address of the property. That's important. We want to know we're making sure we're offering to the right place. And then how much you're offering is the next portion.
So identifying the seller, identifying the seller and the property.
Identifying the property.
And then the amount you're going to offer.
And then the amount you're going to offer. And then that breaks down to how much of a deposit you're putting down. And then at the end, how much you would owe after the deposit. So $200,000, you're putting down a $2,000 deposit. You're going to owe $198,000. Pretty straightforward there. And then the offer continues to break down the contingencies, which is one of your questions. The contingencies are what needs to happen in order for the offer to go through and for the sale to happen.
Okay.
And we're talking, there's the mortgage contingency. So most people need financing to purchase a house. And you have to tell the seller up front how that's going to happen. Are they using an FHA loan? Are you using a conventional loan? How much of a loan are you taking out? So that's broken down into the offer.
Okay.
Okay. The next one is, when are you going to have your inspection done by? These are details the seller needs to know, and they can separate you from other offers. So if you don't need a full financing package, if you have a conventional loan, you're putting 20% down. That's a great loan package you have there. If you have FHA and 3.5% down, the seller needs to know this stuff, because when you're comparing to other people, they want to make sure they're getting the best possible option.
So let me interject with a question.
Sure.
What is the difference between a conventional offer and an FHA offer? What are the differences, or are there any differences?
There are huge differences.
So what are the differences?
For a first-time homebuyer FHA loan, this is to help usually first-time homebuyers purchase a property, lower interest rates, lower down payments, which is the huge thing. FHA loan is 3.5% down. A full conventional loan is 20% down.
To a minimum of 5%.
And there are other packages where you can go down to 3% for a conventional loan, and those work more like FHA. With a first-time FHA, first-time homebuyer FHA loan, and I say first-time homebuyer because most people would qualify if it's their first house for the FHA loan. That loan tends to be strict. The house has to meet certain standards, certain conditions in order for it to go through.
What do you mean by meet? Is that meet in the sense of they're going to have the inspection is going to be different between a conventional and an FHA?
The inspection's the same. The appraisal's different.
I see.
So that's a whole other thing. So the inspection is for you, the buyer. You have an inspection. You pay for the inspector to come in, check out the house. You make sure that the house is in the condition you want it to be in. If not, you try to negotiate with the seller to get repairs or whatever needs to be done. Once you get past that inspection phase, the appraisal gets ordered, and the appraiser determines if the house meets the standards of the loan package you're getting.
Whether it's a conventional FHA or any other
it has to meet
product.
The price has to be justified in the appraisal, and so does the condition of the property. So with a conventional 20% down, like very rarely would they pick up any issues for the appraisal, because you're putting so much down. The bank doesn't really have to worry about any issues with the house.
Because you're beginning with an equity.
Because you're beginning with equity. With the FHA loan, you only have 3.5% down. So this house has to be move-in ready, basically. They can't have many issues. And if it does, they have to be remedied before the house closes, or you're not getting the house. And it could be simple things. It could be peeling paint. That's an FHA issue. It could be a railing missing off stairs. That's an FHA. Very simple things in many cases.
So those are the conditions, right? So give me a quick list of the conditions that for FHA is going to require when you're purchasing a home.
There's a long list of conditions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But the ones I come across most, so when I go into a house with a buyer and I know they have FHA, there are a lot of things that I'm going to look at. the condition of the house, the roof, making sure the roof looks okay. FHA requires at least 2 years life left on the roof. But what I tell first-time home buyers especially, do you want to worry about a house and a roof in 2 years? Most of them don't, because in most cases for the first 5 years, you're still trying to get used to actually having a house and making the payments and all that. You don't want the added cost of a roof. But FHA needs a few years left on the roof in order for it to pass. There can't be any peeling paint because there's potential for lead, especially if the house was built before 1978. Railings, any safety issues, you can't have walls hanging off, barely clinging. There are things like that could prevent the sale from going through. Every situation's different. And every appraiser is different, which is what's tricky for us. So when I walk into a house with a buyer, I try to point out as like I'm an appraiser, things that might be an issue, but realistically, we don't know until the appraisal happens because every appraisal is different. Every person's different. Every house is different. So what one appraiser might see, another might not. So we never know until that's the part of the sale where every agent, we're just hoping for the best because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Yeah. I mean, my first sale was hilarious. But the sale was held up because of a doorknob. It was the doorknob to go to the attic. And the seller kept installing it incorrectly. The appraiser had to come out 3 times to check that doorknob. And the reason why is the door that it was on was a main door to get out the house. And if the doorknob doesn't work properly, it's a safety issue. So the appraiser pointed it out and needed the door to be fixed. My first sale was held up a couple weeks because of the door. So things like that can pop up. It does happen.
So all of that starts from at the beginning of the dance with the offer.
Yes. So when I put in an offer for a buyer, and it starts with me seeing the house with the buyer. When a buyer first walks into a house and they love it, they get stars in their eyes. They don't see the little details that I see because I've seen many beautiful houses. I don't get stars in my eyes anymore. So I see that peeling paint. I see the railings broken. I see that hole in the floor. I see things that could potentially be a hazard. So when I'm writing up the offer, even before the offer's in, I tell the buyer, I saw some things that could be a problem. And the seller likely knows these are, a problem. Either I talk to the agent and try to figure out if the seller's willing to make FHA changes, try to bring the house up to FHA standards if it's called. Every situation is different. And it does start the moment you look at the house, how you're going to negotiate an offer.
So going down the list, identifying the name on the offer, you identify the name of the seller and the property address.
Yes.
The price.
Yep.
And the
deposit
and then the balance owed.
Yep. I can get into details. So the deposit and when you're going to give them the deposit.
I follow you.
There's a date there for that.
Deposit.
There's also, there's 2 lines for a deposit. There is the initial offer deposit, which is usually, we do like $100, $150, and you submit it with the offer.
And then the balance of the deposit.
It gets submitted at whatever date in the future. And I usually have that date set right before the inspection or at the inspection date. So if something were to go wrong, we can, we don't have to move forward. We can easily get the deposit back. But there's a date specific to that. And then the final, how much you owe after that. So with my example before, $200,000 house, $2,000 deposit, you owe $198,000 by the closing date. So that line also has when closing is estimated to be.
I follow you.
And then, so it's also important to know as buyers, when we come up with these dates, I'm guessing at these dates. So when I write up an offer, there is no exact date. When I put a closing date, I'm hoping we can close in 8 weeks. So I put the 8 weeks away or whatever date, I talk to the lender.
About 60 days, something like that.
I talk to the lender to see how quickly they can close. And obviously the shorter time frame looks better for the seller because especially if they want to sell right away, the shorter the time frame, the better. So let's say in a normal situation, we'll do 8 weeks and I'll put 8 weeks away. We hope closing is, if we need extensions, depending on a situation, we can usually get them, but we're guessing 8 weeks. And then we move to the next section is the mortgage contingency.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yep. The next section is mortgage contingency, FHA, conventional, whatever product you're using. And then how much money you're getting off of that loan.
So that contingency is going to be the type of loan, right? And the promise.
Yes. Well,
actually a commitment letter.
What you're doing with the mortgage contingency, it doesn't say anything about having to give them a commitment letter or
usually the mortgage contingency will be in form of the commitment letter.
It would be in the form of a commitment letter to them, but we usually wait as agents, especially to protect our buyers. We wait until we get the clear to close. So just because the buyer gets a commitment letter, there are usually a list of things that they need to do in order to actually get the loan still. A commitment letter isn't saying 100% here it is. It's saying here it is if you complete this list of things.
They're calling them conditions.
Conditions, yeah. And if you and when I get the commitment letter and I look at those conditions and there's nothing major, just maybe submit last week's paycheck. Something simple. I wouldn't extend the contingency date because they basically met everything.
So you keep the mortgage commitment date close to the closing date? Yeah,
at least 10 days before.
Okay.
I usually do, typically, it depends on the situation,
So what document they need to give you to justify the mortgage contingency?
It's the lender I talk to. I mean, if you want to get technical, it is that mortgage contingency letter, but you want it cleared of contingencies. So it's not the initial letter. It's when you get the full clear contingency, you get cleared conditions, excuse me, if that makes sense.
I understand.
Because I could get a commitment letter pretty quickly once everything's done, but the conditions would be, we need the appraisal, we need to verify employment, we need this and this and that and that. Yeah. So it's technically not a cleared file yet.
Okay.
So we wait to protect our buyers as much as possible, and also depends if the seller is willing to let us push that limit, whether or not we can satisfy that contingency.
What other contingencies are there? So
there's the mortgage contingency, there's the inspection contingency, and if you have to sell a house, if you're a buyer and you have a house to sell and you need to sell it in order to purchase, so that's a contingency.
That contingency we have is other clauses and dates.
Yeah, there's a section in the offer that's called provisions, and then you add more detail. The offer basically has everything that could happen in a transaction. So after the mortgage contingency section, you have the inspection. When are you going to have the inspection? And what happens after you have it? You have a certain amount of time to notify the seller if you want repairs.
To submit a request for repairs.
Yep. And the standard offer form also states that the seller is obligated to pay up to $1,000 of termite and treatment or repairs. That's already in there. And depending on the situation, we can strike that out. I don't recommend it, obviously. The most typical offers have that in there. So you have that. And then there's the provision section. And this is where you add things like closing costs. If you need help with closing, you put that in there. If you want the appliances, if you want the refrigerator, washer and dryer, you want all that in your offer. If you want, I always make this joke in the classes, everything that you could want. If you like that dining room table at their house, put it in the offer. If you want them to put a 1,000-foot statue in the front yard, put it in the offer. It has to be there. You can't have them sign off and be like, oops, I want this too, I want that. You have to have it all in the initial offer.
Because the offer is a prelude to the purchase and sale agreement.
Yes.
Which is the contract.
And the contract is basically an extended version of the offer.
With more
detail. A little more detail, of course. One detail would be, what condition does the house have to be delivered at closing? And it's usually just broom swept and clean. And that's just a finer detail that they get into. And then what else is in the offer? We have the closing date, mortgage dates, inspection, the provisions. So what's also tricky there's two different offer forms out there right now.
Okay.
And this is Most agents, I'm finding, use the older offer form that has a little less detail in it. And in that offer form, in the provisions, the older one, you want to make sure that the house has to appraise at or above the value of the house that you're offering.
Oh, the purchase price
of the purchase price that you're offering. Now, the newer offer form already has that in there, so we don't really worry about that wording. But the initial one, and I've run into this.
What would they want to use the old offer for?
People have habits, and they just, it's just with change, especially when a new document comes out. Most people want to see how it plays out, how it works. But I'm finding that more people are transitioning to the newer one, but there are also some details in the newer one that aren't as great as the older one. So it really depends on how you work, and you can't. Not saying that either one is bad or good. It just depends on how the agent works with it. But you want to make sure that the house appraises that value. Can you imagine the house is undervalued, that with that $200,000 house, and the appraisal comes back at 180, but you didn't have that contingency that the house must appraise at or above? Guess what? That seller could push on you and say you either have to come up with the $20,000 or you lose your deposit and you walk away from the house. So you're exposed in that sense. So that little wording, the house must appraise, can make a difference, especially later down the line. Wow. And we don't know that's going to happen until the appraisal, which is happening later in the process.
So that's why very important for you to have that included in the offer at the beginning.
Yes.
So I would say that's the beginning of the dance. You just can't just come up and say, you know what, the dance is over and we're married. It doesn't work like that.
No, you can't just say, here's $200,000. We'll work out the details later. No, we need the details now, because what you'll find purchasing a house is every situation is different. Every person's different. Every house, every lender, every bank, every attorney, every agent. So you have all these little working parts that need to come together. So if you don't have the details lined up in the beginning, things just go sideways.
Not only go
quick.
sideways, but you can lose an opportunity. You might get stuck.
You can lose money.
Yes.
If you're a very strong buyer and you put a $5,000 deposit down and their details are not lined up, you could lose $5,000 before you even started.
So in your professional opinion, what is the most important thing of an offer that you can give?
To make yourself a strong buyer? That's a loaded
to protect
question.
you, just to protect you.
So you want to make sure that your deposit is protected. That's the biggest exposure you have purchasing a house. And say you put down $2,000 and that, the $150,000 house, $2,000 deposit. If things aren't lined up and you're exposed, you could lose $2,000 basically. Okay. And if you do things, you could potentially lose more depending on how the offer is written, how things are. It's really, with the second offer form that I was talking about, there is a clause in there. It's called the default clause. And if the buyer defaults, you could potentially lose up to 5% of the purchase price. Right? Even if you only put down a $2,000 deposit, you're exposing yourself. I always strike that out. I strike that default clause out, unless their deposit is more than the 5%. I want to limit them to only 5% or less. So it really depends on the situation, and I hardly come across it. But that default clause you could potentially lose more than what you put down for a deposit. So
I guess we're coming to a close. And as far as I understand, the very most important thing about an offer is protecting your deposit.
Is protecting yourself and your deposit, yeah.
And the second thing is going to be understanding what goes in the offer and meeting those contingencies, understanding the provision, and making sure that the wording is clear. That way your deposit is protected, you as a buyer protected, whether you're an experienced buyer or brand young first-time home buyers, because we do understand that if you've not been a homeowner for the last 3 years, you're considered to be a first-time home buyer. You're outside of the loop.
Yep.
Don't care if you bought like 10, 15 properties in the past, but within the last 2 years you didn't own one. You are a first-time home buyer. So protecting yourself, protecting the deposit, understanding the provisions, making sure the wording is correct,
Yep.
and meeting those contingency dates. And if you can't meet those dates, have a conversation with your real estate professional so they can aid you and request for the proper extension.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as long as the reason for the extension is reasonable, most sellers will understand because they don't want to start from the beginning again. Because if they let you go as a buyer, they're going to have to start from day one all over again.
And that's a whole different dance and a whole different person.
That is a whole different dance, a whole different person. But it's also important to know that your offer should start before you write anything down on a piece of paper. You should have hopefully an experienced enough agent to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Especially if you have an FHA package. I've had agents, they'll just put in offers on any property and their client wants. And their clients end up getting screwed because that house is in such a mess. It never was going to pass FHA. So you know, it's important to know what you're looking at, the condition of the house you're offering. This all needs to happen before you put in that offer, because you could, let's say you have every intention on purchasing this house. You pay for your inspection. You pay for the appraisal. It's at least $1,000 right there, just to find out at the appraisal that it's never going to pass FHA and the seller's not willing. So even though you would get your deposit back, you lost $1,000 right up front. So it's really important to know the condition of the house, your loan package, all that. We're trying to stick to, just talking about the offer, but there's so much more that goes around it in order for you to have a successful purchase.
Well, I guess let's end this conversation and we can continue another time. I'm looking forward to have you back again, Arlene.
I'm definitely
and I have to say that the offer, after having this conversation with you and with other real estate agents and my past experience, it leads me to believe that for your offer to be a strong offer and you remain protected and meet the contingency dates, is that you have a very good initial assessment with your real estate agent.
Yes.
Because when the first thing you do when you meet a real estate agent is they're going to assess you. That assessment is going to solidify and make your offer strong and protected.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Well, Arlene Castellano, Realtor from Maria Acuna Real Estate Agency here in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's been a great pleasure and an honor having a person like you onto this program today.
I appreciate you having me.
And, thank you for joining me here. My name is David Philly, your host on Buy Me Casa podcast. Thank you, Arlene. Okay, see you next time.
See ya. Thank you.